All right, hi everyone. I'm gonna make an attempt at this video thing, and I'm gonna try and walk you through some of the basics of Excel. So I've got the sample worksheet open, and I suggest that you do too, so that you can follow along with these steps. Not really gonna do too much here, just gonna kind of give you a tour of it. So I'll try and keep this as short as I can, but um, well, let's get started. All right, so I think we already know what the ribbon is. That appears in lots of Microsoft applications, but it's this area up here with these tabs. You're going to have to know what I mean when I say, go to the Insert tab here. You'll be using that for your first assignment. You'll be inserting charts over here. So anyways, this is the ribbon here. I think most of you knew that already. And here I've got an Excel file is called a workbook. It's called a workbook because it can have a bunch of worksheets. So down here on the you can see these tabs along the bottom. These are the different worksheets in the book. So each tab here represents a different worksheet. So it kind of allows you to combine a bunch of spreadsheets into one workbook. So I get the ellipsis here if I run out of space, and I can use the arrows here to move through the tabs. So I think we're going to be spending most of our time on the first tab here on this one. So each sheet in a workbook is made up of columns, rows, and cells. So I've got my columns here. The columns are labeled by letters, column A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on. And then the rows use numbers. So row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then that allows us to give a location to each cell. So you can see here I'm clicking on these different cells, and you can see which cell I've clicked on up here in this little selector box, so that the location of this cell is A6, so it's in column A and row 6. Um, and when we click on a cell, we call that the active cell. I'll be referring to the active cell quite a bit. Um, Now, I can select more than one cell, and that's called a range. So you can actually select ranges of cells. So what I could do to select a range of cells is um, press the mouse and hold and drag across all these cells. Now I've got a whole bunch of cells selected, and that's called a range. So this range, you can label a range by the first cell in the upper left corner, and then the last cell in the lower right corner. And what I mean by that is, so this is cell A5 here, and over here I'll just go, this is cell J11. So I could click and drag across A5 down to J11 to select that range. Or the other thing that I can do is I can go up to this little selector inbox here, and I can type in A5 like that, and then put a colon, and then J11, and then hit enter, and that will select that range for me. So let me try that again. So A5, so the first cell in the upper left corner goes first, and then you put a colon, and then you do the cell in the lower right corner of the range. So J11, and you can see when I hit enter here, that will select that range for me. So you need to know um, what ranges are, because you'll get a lot of instructions to select certain ranges. And you can actually select multiple ranges too by holding the control key down. So right here I'm going to click and drag and select some cells in the first column. And then if I hold the control key down, I can actually click and select another range. So now I've got multiple ranges selected here. So I've got the first column selected, and then this third column selected over here. So you'll have to do that at times in your assignments as well. One thing about going back to these different worksheets, if I wanted to add a new one, I could click this plus button right here, and that would give me a new worksheet in my workbook, and I could right click on the tab for it. So you see it defaults to a name of sheet 1 or sheet 2 or whatever, but if I right click on that tab and do rename, I can call it whatever I want, like my sheet here. So you'll have to be creating new worksheets in your assignments and renaming the tabs for them as well. Another thing you need to know about right off the bat is what this is right here. This is called the formula bar. It's right underneath the ribbon, and we can use it to enter data into a cell. So you can see that my active cell here is A1. So if I click into the formula bar and start typing, I can type something and hit enter, so I can enter things directly into a cell. Right here, I'm going to click, I double clicked into cell A2 there, and I can type in, you can see that it appears in the formula bar as well. So I can enter values in there, but I can also enter formulas in here, and we'll talk about those in a little bit here. Up here, we have what's called the quick access bar, and you'll see this in all the Microsoft Office apps too. So if you know what it is in one program like Excel, it works the same way in Word and PowerPoint. But it just gives me some, here's a button to save, or here's my undo and redo buttons, and I can actually customize this to add a bunch of stuff. If I wanted to, I can add some like quick print here that adds a little icon so that I can quickly print my workbook. So anyways, that's called the quick access bar. And then down here on the bottom of the screen, you'll see this on the Office Suite apps. They all have this too. It's called the status bar on the bottom. So I can zoom in, should be able, maybe I need to go to another sheet to zoom in. But on this sheet, you can see I can zoom in and out by dragging this slider on the status bar, and I can do other things too. If I right click on here, it'll allow me to add new features to the status bar. I guess I don't know if we'll be using these much throughout the course, but you could play around with them and you can kind of customize the status bar to do all sorts of things, just like you can customize the quick access toolbar. So another thing you need to know about when you're working with Excel, let me crank this up a little bit so I can see it a little bit better. That should be better. Is you have to understand this concept of cursors. And the cursor is basically where your mouse is. So you can see I've got that plus sign over here in row 1. That's my cursor, but the cursor will change depending on different situations. For example, right here, if I put the cursor right at one of the borders of the column headers here, it gives me these kind of handlebar cursors, and I can resize my column here. If I wanted to resize more than one column, I could just press on the column, and now I'm pressing and holding, and I can drag to select a bunch of columns, and then I can resize all those columns at once, so they'll all get resized. Now you see this a lot in Excel. If your column's too small, then it doesn't have enough space to show the data, you'll get these hash marks here. So that'll happen. It throws some people off sometimes, but if you stretch your columns out, then it'll show all the data when it has enough room. So that'll come up for you sometimes. All right, so going back to these cursors, so you can see that I can resize my rows when I get the handlebar cursor. I'm sorry, I can resize my columns here, but I can also resize my rows. You can see that if I hover over here and I get those handlebars, those vertical handlebars, I can actually resize a row here too. The default cursor is just this kind of fat plus sign, so that you can use that to select cells. So that's kind of the default cursor, but I want to show you another cursor that we're going to be using a lot in this course, and you need to understand it right off the bat. I'm going to switch over to my sheet here that has some basically no data in it, but it's called the fill handle. So you get the fill handle here by putting your cursor down in the lower left corner of a cell, and it's that skinny dark plus sign, and we use that to copy data. So for example, here in cell A4, I'm going to put some numbers, and if I wanted to copy those numbers, I could put the fill handle, get the fill handle by hovering over that lower right corner, and I can either drag across like that, and it will copy those numbers across cells. Or the other thing I could do is I could drag down to copy those values down. Now, copying numbers is handy sometimes, but what we're going to be copying mostly throughout this course is formulas. So I'll talk about formulas in a little bit here. But first I'm going to undo these changes. So I'm doing Control Z, and that'll undo the last few steps that I did. So you can use Control Z to undo some steps. And I just want to show you some things about entering data. So if I need to enter data down across a column, so across information or across a column like this, I can, let me just put my cursor into cell A5 and I'll put a number in. I'm just making up numbers. But if I hit the return key, it will take me down. So it makes it, if you know that you pressing the return key will move the active cell to the next cell down, and it makes it kind of handy to know this trick. because sometimes you want to fill data across and not down. So if I use the tab key, that will, so I enter 66 here and I hit tab, that will take me to the next cell to the right. So it can really speed up your data entry if you know the difference between using the tab key and the enter key. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and enter some data in here, and I'm just kind of making this up, just giving myself something to work with. And I can actually insert a column here. So what I want to do is, if I need to, I can right click up in a column and I can do insert, and that way if you decide you want some labels here, like I could put Monday. Now watch this, this is kind of cool. So if I put MON for Monday here, and then I get the fill handle and I drag down like this, look what it does. So it kind of auto fills in the rest of the days. You can do this with times and months and days and numbers. It comes in really handy. So using the fill handle, you can copy there. It's called copying a sequence. So this is a sequence of days, but you can copy other types of sequence as well here. So I'm just kind of making this up. I'm gonna get rid of my data in cell B2, B1, and B2 like that, and I'm gonna say this is a tip spreadsheet. So we keep track of our tips here. So a lot of times what we'll see here is you put the title for the spreadsheet here in cell A1, and then what you can do is I'm going to click off the cell and then click on it again so that I get the selection cursor, and then I'm going to drag across to column D here, and what I'll do is I'll merge and center. So what that does is that merges those cells, and we normally, like I said, with cell A1 we merge all the cells in the first row, and then we put the title of the spreadsheet in there, and then we usually crank up the font size to, I don't know, 24 and make it bold or something like that. That's kind of a common formatting thing that you'll see on spreadsheets. I'm going to put in a name here, maybe Bob's Tips for the week, and then I'll hit tab and put in Sally's Tips for the week, like that. And now here's what I want to show you is formulas. So I think over here this would be our totals for each day. So I'll make this totals, and then now I'm down in cell D4, and I want to figure out the total tips that Bob and Sally made together. So what I can do here is I can use a formula. So to use a formula, formulas always start with the equal sign. So you can enter it either in the cell itself or in the formula bar, but formulas always start with an equal sign. And then what I'm going to do here is use a formula called the sum. This is actually what's called a function. It's a type of formula. But I'm going to type in equals sum, and then I'm going to type in the parentheses. And once I type in the opening parentheses, then I can go ahead and drag across the cells that I want to include in my sum. So I've dragged across the range B4 to C4, and you can see that up here in the formula bar. And then once I'm done selecting my cells that I want to sum up my total for, I can just type in the closing parenthesis and hit enter. And that's the recommended way that Microsoft says you should enter your formulas. So it's kind of a combination of using the keyboard and the mouse all together. So what I've gotten here is not really a value, but a formula. So this is a calculation. So the nice thing, this is what you have to understand about Excel. The nice thing about using formulas is if I update some data here, like let's say I realize that Bob actually made $85. So if I go ahead and update this to $85 and hit enter, you'll see that my cell that has the formula automatically updates to reflect that change. So this right here is the power of Excel. It's using these formulas to do all, so that when you make a change to your spreadsheet, your formulas kick in and they update all your totals or all the other cells that are depending on values in other cells. Okay, very, very important. That's what makes Excel so powerful, is using these formulas. Now, the other cool thing is I can copy formulas. So I can get, and I use the fill handle for that. So I go into this, I select this cell, which has my formula, and now I want to copy that formula down so that I get the totals for each of the days. So I get the fill handle, now I press and hold, and you'll see that my formula automatically copies down. And now the funny thing is it kind of works intuitively. So we're going to talk about how these formulas work more in the future, but this is what's there's a concept in Excel called absolute cell references and relative cell references, and it's a really important concept, and we'll get into it a little bit later. But for now, I think you can just be happy with the fact that when you copy a formula, it kind of intuitively works the way that we want it to. Okay. Well, I guess most of the times it intuitively works the way we want it to, but not always. So anyways, we'll talk more about absolute and relative cell references in the future. The other thing that Excel gives you a lot of power in is creating charts. So what you do to create a chart is you can select a range, and Excel is really good about figuring out what kind of chart to use. So I got a range selected here, then I'm going to go to the Insert tab, and I'm going to choose, these are all the charts that I can choose from. Now we're going to explore some of these more later, but Excel can recommend charts based on what you have selected in your range. So I'll go ahead and do that. And so it's recommending that I use these bar charts, just different variations of the bar charts. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick one here, this one, and then I click OK, and that creates a chart here. So you can see it did a pretty good job here too. Um, it's got, looks like it's got Bob in blue and Sally in orange, and then the totals got included in here too. Now normally you don't want to include the totals. I'm going to do this again. Um, I'm going to do this over. I'm going to delete this chart, so I'm just going to click on it, and I forgot about that. But so I'm going to click on the chart and hit delete. How do I do that here? So I deleted my chart here. Normally you don't want to include totals in your charts because it kind of goes against the purpose of the chart. So I'm going to select this range again, but I'm not going to include the totals column. So now I've just got the days and Bob and Sally's tips for each day. And I'll go to the Insert tab and choose Recommended Charts again and choose that same chart. Is that the same chart? No, I think this is the one I was using. I'll hit OK. And now you can see I don't have the total column now anymore, and I think this makes a little more sense. So I can change the chart name here. I can call it Bob and Sally's tips by day. And the other thing that I can do, and you'll have to do this on your assignment, is I can move this chart to a different tab. So if I've got the chart selected in the design tab here, or actually I think this button is always visible regardless of what tab you're working on. If you have a chart selected, there's this move chart button. If I click that and then I choose this radio button here, I want to move this chart to a different worksheet. So I'll just call it Bob and Sally. We'll see what happens here. So this is going to move my chart to a different tab. You can see the new tab down here. So you'll have to do that on your first assignment as well. And, I think that's about all I can show you right now. I'm probably missing something, but this should be enough to get you started on your first assignment. You may have to do a little bit of research, but I think this covers pretty much everything you're going to have on your assignment. All right, thanks for listening, and get to work.